Okay, so a topic for today is GraphQL and Apollo Client. I'll just start. So why are we here? So what is our agenda of being here in this webinar? I'll start with that. So for today, we'll talk about like how we'll get to know about GraphQL and how it is different from REST APIs. And our second agenda for today is how we used Apollo Client library to handle the API calls effectively, and using its cache to make those API calls more effective. So this is our agenda for today, knowing about GraphQL and Apollo Client. Next, if you go, before that, I'll just talk about Glific, like what Glific is and what is the problem that it's trying to solve before going to the tech stack. So what Glific is actually a two-way communication platform that helps NGOs to connect with their beneficiaries. In recent times, what happened when the COVID wave hit, the NGOs were not able to physically get to their beneficiaries and help them, ask them what are their problems, and to know about their problems. Usually NGOs does that by interacting with them one-to-one or in a group, but due to COVID, they were not able to do so. So we thought like how we can help these NGOs to effectively communicate with these beneficiaries. We saw two things, like mobile phones and data is getting more and more cheaper, and usually like most of the like village people have the availability of mobile phones and these net. So we thought of a platform to build for NGOs where they can connect with their beneficiaries using WhatsApp. So just connecting was not the simple solution. We need to communicate with them at a large scale. So for that, we needed some kind of chatbot system. So that also we have integrated in Glific. That's just a gist of what Glific does this. And if you want to know more about Glific, you can visit our website, glific.org. Okay. So next, moving forward, I'll just start like why we have used GraphQL. And before getting into why we use GraphQL, I need to check the faults in the REST APIs, what we have. And I'll just go with the faults. Before that, if anyone have any question on Glific and what problem we are trying to solve here. No? Okay, moving forward. So as you know, like the primary REST APIs that we currently use has three main problems that I can gather. First is overfetching. Like if you have a user, suppose, and you want its attributes, like its name, its profession, its age. And I got all those details in an API call. But suddenly I thought like the age is not relevant. So what will I do? I will just change in my backend that we don't need to query age and just remove it. Next day, I thought like I don't need profession now. And in this way, I need to again go to backend and change that call. Like we don't need profession again. And next day I come in again, I need profession back. So this is something that we usually get with the REST APIs that if we want, we create a print structure like in user, you have name, ID, profession, and you will get all the details even if you don't want it. If you want to change it, you usually does it with the change in backend. That's not very effective. Okay, the second thing is multiple requests for multiple resources. Suppose you have a user and a user has some interest. So for a user call, you will make a call to the user API, and for its interest, you will make a call to the interest API. So there will be two calls here, right? With GraphQL, what we do is we make a single call for these both requests for the user's interest. And third, we have the fault in REST API is the waterfall network request. So what happens in waterfall is, suppose you want an attribute of a user. So first, you will get the attribute ID from the user endpoint, and then you will use that ID to get the second attribute like interest. So this is like a waterfall method where you first get the user, and with that user information, you get the second thing, interest. And with that interest, suppose you have some other thing goal, with that API, you will get the goal. So these are the three primary faults that we have in REST APIs. If anyone have any questions or clarifications needed in that, you can ask.
I want this. I didn't understand the second point. Do you please repeat it?
Okay, multiple requests for multiple resources, right?
Hmm.
Okay, I'll just give a primary demonstration. With that, you will have a better clarity, like how it goes. Okay. So I'm moving on to the next slide and the demonstration part. So I'll just give a primary demonstration. So suppose this is a profile of a person, and we have 4 attributes. I have 3 attributes: his name, age, and profession, right? So what you will do to make a like REST API call, you will do something like this, right? Glific webinar.com user and /ID. You get all these 3 attributes, right? Okay, now suppose you want user's interest, right? How will you do that? You will just make another API call user interest and with that user ID. So this will be 2 different calls, right? First is the user and second will be user's interest. So in this case, we have 2 separate REST API calls for getting the user, and second we are getting the interest of the user. So these can be avoided with the help of GraphQL by doing something like this. So we will just provide a user. So we'll just have a single API call, Glific Webinar /API, and we'll just provide a query. User, name, age, profession, and his interest in books and games. Now, what is the benefit of this using this is, now suppose someday a user does not want to have games in a section. So I'll just remove games from here and it will work good. But in this case, like if I try to do this with the REST API, I need to do some modifications in my backend to remove this games. Otherwise, we'll have that games on our UI. The data is there, but we can't do anything with that data. So that will be like overfetching of data. Did you get the point? Like I'm making anything difficult?
It's clear.
So first is the like I'll explain point by point overfetching. So let's suppose we want the user's things like name, age, profession. I made this API called user ID. I got these 3 things. So next I thought like I don't need profession. What will I do? I'll change. I will just not use this profession in my UI. I will get it from the backend, but I will not use it, right? So that data will like be redundant. Like I called in the this ID, this profession, but I did not use it. With GraphQL, what we can do is we will just remove this profession from here, and we don't get the data for profession also. So this way, the overfetching is removed. Like we don't call the data that we don't need. In the like REST API, we don't have that option. We need to like hard change it manually from the backend. Second is like I said, the multiple API calls. Like for user, we have different call. For user interest, we have different calls. In GraphQL, we summarize these both calls in a single query, and we just need to make a single query there. So for user, we can have interest, and there we can have books and games. Okay. Any questions so far? No. Okay. Moving forward. So I'll just another example of for using REST API and GraphQL is like we have an albums, and we have some comments on those albums. So with REST API, what we'll do is we'll make 2 API calls. First is the album ID with assets, and second with the asset ID, we'll get comments. So as you can see, these are the 2 separate IDs that we need to put in. So there will be 2 API calls. With GraphQL, what we will do is we will just say like, give me assets and the comments for that. If like next day I don't need comments, I'll just remove this comment part and I will not get any comments. So with that, we don't need to like, there are 2 benefits. We don't need to make separate API, 2 separate API calls. And if we want to remove the data, we don't call the data. We will not query that data and we will not get that data. So the overfetching is removed and multiple calling of that API is removed in that way. Okay. Next, we have like the call types that we have in GraphQL. So I'll just go through them. There are 3 types of GraphQL calls that can be made. First is the query. So query we use when we need to get some data, like we need to get the user, we need to get the interest of the user. That is simply a, the get API call, where we query in the data. Next, we have the mutation, where we usually update the user, where we delete the user or create a user. It's basically the CRUD operations where we create, update, or delete the mutation part. And third is the subscription, where we subscribe to events on server. So in normal cases, we can't see anything that we don't want. Like I have to get a data, I need to request my server to get access for that data. But what happens is give subscription. If like a server gets some data, it will push that data to the client. The client will not ask it. This happens when a WebSocket connection is made between the client and the server, and server can push data to the client in that way. Client does not need to ask anything. Like client does not need to ask a new messages came. The server will push that data to the client. Okay. Any questions on this? Yeah. Any? No. Okay. Yeah. Moving forward. I'll just show you like how we query the data in GraphQL, and this is how we write a primary query. This is the screen from Glific, where we show all the contact profile details. And here, as you can see, I have made a query with the contact, and these are the things that I get from that query. So these are the collections that I get. This is the person I'm assigned to. So suppose in the next day I don't want who I'm assigned to. I'll just remove this data, the users from the collections, and I'll just remove it from the UI. So I didn't need to change anything from the backend. So I don't need to make any change to my query. Like don't query this. I'll just say that I don't need this data, so I will not get this data in my query. Next, we have mutation. So similar, like you update something with the post type. Here we have mutations, where suppose I want to change like my language. I will just put my ID and the input fields, like my language should be Hindi now, and it will just update it. So it's similar how we update in REST API calls. We'll just call it mutation here. Okay. So next, we have this GraphQL, this new type of spec. Over that, we have a client library called Apollo Client, which helps us to make our calls with GraphQL much more easier. And there are many such more benefits with that. So just we'll have a look. So since GraphQL is just a spec, it can be used simply with Axios or Fetch also. Also, you have used like Axios query with some body and something, or the fetch query. So similarly, we can use this GraphQL also with that method. So it's just a spec like how we send that data to the backend and how backend queries. Similarly, we can do it with the Axios or fetch calls also. We just provide that type, like query type and what the data we need. So it's similar to that, but we wanted a library which sets some standards on how to write these queries, on how to write these mutations, and how to effectively handle these all. So we chose, research around a bit. There were several options. There was one library called Relay. There was another, this called Apollo Client. So finally, have you gone to Apollo Client because it has much more benefits to what our needs. Okay, so I'll just go through those benefits. So we chose Apollo Client library due to these reasons. So first is it encapsulates like how we fetch the data, what is the loading state and error state. Usually this if we do it from the fetch or Axios method, we need to check like what's the loading state, and if error comes in, what should we do. So this all Apollo handles it internally and encapsulates all that. So you don't need to worry like how it's handling that. First thing is that. Second, since it's a Glific is a chat application, we need to handle subscriptions using WebSockets more effectively and updating the UI in real time. So for that, the subscription handling part, Apollo Client handles it really well. We just need to configure it for some things. Other than that, we don't need to do anything. And the third point was session handling was quite easy with it. So usually we need to pass headers for the authorization. And with that, for authorization headers, also we need to make a renew call token after half an hour. So with this, session handling was quite easy. We just need to provide a config, like this is my session, this is my session variables, and this how you can do it easily. Okay. Any questions so far? Yeah. Okay, moving forward. So this is just example like how we use Apollo client with React hooks. And as you can see with use query, I've made a query get all dogs, and I'll just provide like this is the loading state. This variable holds the loading state. This will hold the error state. This will load all my data. So as you can see, it's quite easy. Just get this query, and if error comes in, return the error object. I mean the component. If a loading comes in, return the fetching component. Otherwise, return my list of dogs. So as you can see, it's quite encapsulated in that way. Like I don't need to worry about like what happens if that loading state comes in with the fetch calls, and what happens if error comes in. I'll just get that boolean inside these constraints. It encapsulates so much. It even don't tell us like how we made that GraphQL API call. So it's quite easy in that way, like the UI wise and how we work with it. Okay. So like I just demonstrating the example using this with React hooks is pretty easy, and I'll just give you a demonstration of how we use it in Glific. So in Glific, we wanted the contact details, which we show on the header part. And similarly, for the contact details, we have these loading states, data, loading, and error. So what we did is check, like if the loading state is there, show a loading component. Otherwise, if it's an error, show the error component. And if we get all the data, then we show a contact description component, wherein we, like I already showed there, this is the component that load the details and all, if we get all the data. Okay. So this is how we make a like query call with Apollo client, and it's pretty easy. Next, one of the major benefits of using Apollo is the cache that it stores in the browser. So whenever we make a query to the backend, that query is saved in Apollo cache. So we don't need to make that query once again whenever we open the application. So let's say I have called this query get contact details. I don't need to make this query, don't need to call this to the backend again. It will be saved in my cache, and I can just retrieve that details again from the cache using the read query method. So I'll just say like read query, and I will give this query to get contact details, and it will give me all the data. It will not check from the backend. It will read from the query in that case, the cache from in that case. So that saves us a lot of API calls. We don't need to check from the backend. If we have the data, we will get it from the cache itself, from the browser's cache. And each API call that we make is gets saved in the browser's cache. This way, it's pretty easy to use and manipulate that cache and to update that UI with that cache. Nothing related to the backend. The dependency with the backend is gone in that case to update the UI.
The
Okay, so
data changes.
yeah, go ahead.
If the data
So,
changes
yeah,
at
go
back,
ahead.
then how we fetch means then does it automatically update the data, or we have to make another request?
So that there the subscriptions part come in. So if the data changes, server pushes the data to the client. We don't need to make a request. Server says like this is updated. If you want to change this, I'm giving you the subscription, and we will receive the subscription and update basis of on the basis of that. So usually when a new message comes in, like in case of Glific, the server says a new message came in, and we update the local cache with that new message, and the UI gets updated. So we don't need to make a call to the backend. The backend gives us the data with the help of subscriptions. But in this case, you are saying like we don't need to. We need to make an API call if the data changes. It will not get updated in real time without getting the data from the backend. So this is in that case, like you try to delete something, and you didn't like we have a list of things, and you try to delete one portion of a list, and you don't want to recall that the list of again. So what you will do is just remove that data from cache, the list, the part of the list. It will get updated in the UI. You don't need to call the whole list again. So with that, the cache is used with the read query. Okay. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, moving forward. Okay, so that's from my side. So in thank you everyone for listening. In next week webinar, I will touch upon the Apollo cache and how we use this Apollo cache to handle subscriptions in real time and showing that real messages. So that's it from my side. We'll hope to see you again.
Yeah,
Any
sure.
other? Yeah,
I
go
have a
ahead, Sam.
question that you demonstrated that GraphQL has various advantages over REST API. So is there any field or is there any other areas where REST APIs is preferred over GraphQL, or where GraphQL does not cover all the advantages?
Okay, so I'm not sure. Like, yeah, there primarily I can't see any disadvantages of GraphQL, but I am still not sure. Like where it is so it's lacking primarily on the community wise. So our primary systems were built on REST APIs and how they were made, and it's still an evolving pace. So there are a couple of bugs here and there. So what I will say is the GraphQL is just a spec on how we make an API call. It's not yet standardized like how it should be done. So Apollo does it some other way, Relay does it some other way, and people at other places can do it some other way. So I think there is no set of standards present here. That is one of the major defect that I can think of. Other than that, mm, other than that, there is one more thing. So as you can see, like here there are two dependencies. One is for the backend and one is for the front end. So on the backend, we need an additional layer of GraphQL to handle everything for that API. And on the front end also, we need to create those GraphQL charts. Sorry, the GraphQL queries. So there were two times of development time that takes. In REST API, we'll just say that this is the API, and if you want, you can just get it through this endpoint. But in this case, we will just write all the specs that we need also, and then call that query again. Similarly, in the backend, we will write all those resolvers for that. Without the resolvers, it would have been like I will just query the backend and it will give me the data, all of the data. So if you want just a quick and easy solution, then the REST API, I think it will be preferred. Other than that, I think GraphQL is more preferred. I'm still not sure like what are other major benefits, but yeah, this is what I can think of now. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, then yeah. Let's wrap it up for today, and we'll hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Bye bye.